Paz,
Hello,
Rocío.
Professor. I don't know if you got my email.
Well, I checked the email, but I don't know if did you write it to the institutional email, right?
Yes.
Or a Gmail account?
No, to your institutional email.
Institutional email, all right.
But I can explain you now if you want.
I mean, if that's okay with you,
It's
yeah,
just
because
that
I checked the email, but
Nicole.
I don't recall having read any.
No, no worries. I will tell you now. It's just that Nicole had an issue again with her internet connection, and since yesterday, so now she won't be able to participate and to present.
Okay, all right, all right.
I already told Belen and her group, and I think they are ready to present now. But I also wanted to ask you if it would be an issue to record our presentation and then show it to you, because Nicole says that she actually had a problem with the router since the
Mm-hmm.
electricity breakdown that she had,
Okay.
because it like it doesn't turn
Mm-hmm.
on. So maybe she will have to buy a internet plan for her cell phone. So to avoid having this issue, she wanted to know if you would accept a recording of our presentation for next class.
Okay, we will see how this goes on. If you can make it next class, then you can give your book report next class. If you cannot do next class, maybe you can be listed as the last group to present. We will see how this goes on, and if it gets fixed, we'll play the game according to the conditions that you have. All right. So it could be next
Okay,
session, or it could be at the end of the book reports for the romantic period. Okay.
we will keep you informed about any issue that we
All
will
right. So
we met.
we have more participants. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully,
Good morning.
Morning.
thank you
Morning.
so much, Maribas. Good morning,
Thank
Carlos.
you.
Morning, you. Hello. Mm-hmm. Sure. And we have another group ready to give a presentation today on the May 15th. Still a romantic literary work, right? Um, is a group here?
Excuse me, sir. Could you repeat that, please? I got lagged.
Yes, please.
Sure. So Maria Paz and Nicole, because of technical issues, cannot give their book report today. They will give it later. So, is any other group prepared? And as I mentioned last session, we're going to have to work under this context, being all of the groups prepared to give their I mean, all of the groups prepared from the romantic period ready. Okay, all of the groups should be ready. The ones giving reports on romantic books. Okay, and therefore,
Okay.
all right, therefore we can have this plan B, plan C, plan D, in case a group has issues, technical issues, right? Okay, so if not,
Yes,
I
sir.
think what's the scarlet letter, right, Maria Paz?
Yes, it
Carlos?
was the Scarlet Letter.
Okay.
And I don't know
So
if our group can present now, which is from the romantic period. But is it necessary to have the cameras turned on? I don't know if my group agree. So they have to say yes or no. I don't know.
I think that we can present. The thing is that my internet connection is not enough to, it's not strong enough to have the camera on.
Yes,
I
I
don't
have
Oh
know.
no,
the same problem.
no. You do not need the camera on.
Okay.
Yeah. No. Maybe one of you can, if you have any visual material or audio visual material, one of you can share it. But you don't need to have the camera on.
Yes, we have a PPT presentation. I think Miguel
Okay.
is able to share his desk, and
Okay, I mean
so
I
we
can try it, but in the morning I had some trouble when we were rehearsing the presentation. But if we have any trouble, please be patient. This is the first time
yes.
we're doing this. Be kind. Don't kill
Yes,
us,
please have
please.
some consideration.
We we will. We will. Okay, you take over. You are
Okay.
now taking over. Okay, good.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll share. Okay, escritorio, the black cat. Here we go. Esa presentación. Okay, I'm ready. I don't know about you girls, Carlos.
I can't see anything.
We are.
No, I mean if you're ready.
Oh,
Yes, we are.
Yes.
Just
I
start
think.
sharing your desk. It's all right.
Okay, I'm closing everything that is not necessary because. And here we go. Okay, can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yes.
Everyone can see it, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, today we're here from our houses to start with the presentations on Romantic period books. Our group is in charge of presenting The Black Cat, which is a tale written by Edgar Allan Poe. My group is composed by Romina Flores, Laura Gallardo, Carlos Mesa, Claudia Reyes, and yours truly, Miguel Loyola. Oops. Okay, so first we need to define who Edgar Allan Poe was. Okay, so Edgar Allan Poe was an American writer, a poet, critic, and editor, recognized for being one of the fathers of the Romantic movement and the Gothic movement in general. Most of his tales and books are gloomy, dark, and they have a terror or horror element into it. He was born in January 19, 1809 in the city of Boston, Massachusetts. As I said before, he was one of the forefathers of this American Romantic movement. He himself had a really interesting and stormy life because when he was 40, he had already married his cousin. He had had a lot of fights with other writers, and he was a bit of a drinker. He liked to drink. And here we have his first book, which was self-published, which was called The Tamburlaine and Other Poems, and when he was 18, in 1827. Moving on to the next slide.
Okay. Now we will analyze the background of the tale. The Black Cat was first published in the United States Saturday Post in August 1843, and Poe considered it one of his best tales, and it became immediately popular. Also, it is a study of the psychology of guilt, as we will see it through this tale's analysis. And now we will review the sociocultural context.
Well, now we're going to review the social cultural context, which is the Romanticism that and where this tale was published. This is quite interesting and long story, I have to say. First of all, the Romanticism was created in Germany, in Europe, and then it was moved to the United States. Okay, so first in Europe, this movement consisted in the imagination and subjectivity. It showed a natural world. The escapism was one of their topics. They're also related to the men from the past that were seen as to a certain degree of heroes. However, when this movement came to the United States in this period of 1820 to 1860, this movement acquired new values such as individualism, freedom, and patriotism, spirituality. And well, this happened because in the United States, first in the 1770s, occurred their Great Revolution of the United States. So this was a new emerging country. These new people had a new identity and they felt really proud. This was considered as the American Renaissance. Well, another thing about the American Romanticism that I have to pinpoint is that Poe opened a new perspective from this Romanticism. Instead of seeing nature, imagination, escapism, he opened the door to the Gothic side, to a darker side, in which he involved mystery, terror, and this psychological horror that he brought, for example, in some of his tales, such as The Black Cat and others. Well, and continuing, this was the American Renaissance. Well, because we have to understand the context that the cities were growing. It was a sort of industrial revolution. Everything was modern. Therefore, the people from the countries came to live in the cities, and they needed a way to escape from the city that was quite ugly and full of people. That we have to understand that at those ages, the conditions people were living were disastrous. There was no hygiene, for example. So reading these kind of books immersed them in a new world, which was everything magical, beautiful, perfect, as we can see in the picture. Well, this is from not a literary part aspect of this Romanticism, but literature includes, and in some degree, these characteristics. Then we have the interest in popular religion and occult. In this period, we have to understand that white men had to live in some places of the United States with natives, and the natives respected nature. We have to understand that. Therefore, some white people started to think that nature was precious, and nature had so many answers, and they could help the people by using them, but in the correct way. Then we have this issue, this period also. This is a topic we saw in class, that was slavery. When the slavery, well, we know that they came from Africa, and this was a quite profitable industry and cruel to the society. Then, because of this, there occurred so many revolts, and it was the fugitive slave law was created because slaves were escaping, were being hidden, because this wasn't human. This was human, of course. And well, in that age, white people said, okay, no, this is our industry. This is where we are making money from this. So every slave that escaped, we have they have to return. And then because of these revolts occurred this abolitionism, that because of the literary works white people started to think that slavery was bad, and these slaves were conscious and they could write and read. But in that period, even some white people was not able to read and write. Therefore, this was seen as a status, I would say, from an intellectual point of view. Another topic, we have so many topics, this is quite interesting. We have the Californian gold rush. Well, this happened in 1847, as far as I know, 48, where in California, white people found that was a high amount of gold. You have to imagine that during those years, over 100,000 of only white people, not natives, lived there just to become rich. And they profited more than $2 billion of this material worth. So you have to understand they were doing this Americas. That's what we continue saying nowadays. Well, another event that happened during this period was the Trail of Tears. Yes, and this Trail of Tears, it was that the natives of the lands, due to the exploitation of the white men to the resources, they did not have any sort or any degree of their maintenance, I would say. So they had no food. For example, the bisons were extincted, and they had to move because there wasn't other way that they could survive in this environment. And of course, other resources, natural resources. Then, for example, we had this Underground Railroad regarding these slaves that some white people also believed that slavery was bad for them. Therefore, these white people helped the black people to escape from slavery, to go to the north. So they were hidden, and they were transported to safer places. So this will be part of this context. I know it's not everything in here, but happened so many events, quite interesting. You have to look all of them. So moving to the next section.
Now we will review the characters of this tale. I would like to start with the narrator. He used to be a kind person who loved animals, but through time he started to feel rejection towards his pets, as he became an alcoholic, especially towards Pluto, the black cat, with whom he would get along very well. Also, through the tale, the author was unstable psychologically and struggled to discern between right and wrong. However, he never assumed his responsibility in any of his mad actions. Then we have the narrator's wife. She is the only female figure that appeared in the tale. She is kind of loyal, and according to the narrator, very she was very superstitious, and additionally she was a victim of his husband's rage as well as Pluto, and she became actually submissive to his abuse. However, she was also willing to interfere on behalf of animals. Then we have Pluto, and he was the narrator's best friend. However, as his owner's addiction raised, he became the subject of abuse, and the narrator blames Pluto for his madness. Then we have the second cat, and he remains nameless as the narrator. Also, he looked like Pluto, except that he had a white patch on his chest. Actually, this resemblance made the narrator even more paranoid and became repulsed by this new cat because this cat was everywhere around in his house. Then we have the policeman, and they came to investigate the narrator's wife murder. They actually discovered the author's crime and they were about to leave the house when the narrator exposed himself and revealed the location of his wife's corpse. Now we will continue with the next section.
Okay, we're going to continue with the plot. The narrator starts by telling about his childhood and the love he has for animals. Then he mentioned that he married early, but his wife shares his love for animals as well, leading them to have several pets, although the narrator's favorite pet has been Pluto, and he described him as a large, beautiful black cat. Through the tale, the narrator suffers from a change in his personality, saying that it's for worse, and due to the problems with alcohol he has, he started to attack his wife and pets, but not Pluto. One night, the narrator was coming from the tavern and he attempted to grab Pluto, but the cat wounded him in the hand. So the narrator was so mad that he wounded the cat in the throat and cut one of his eyes off. By the morning, the narrator mentioned that he didn't feel any remorse for his action. However, days later, the narrator hung Pluto from a tree. Then, a fire started at his house, and the narrator was able to escape along with his wife and the servant. But the house was completely destroyed except for a wall in which the figure of a large black cat appeared, calling the attention of every person that was present in the place. The climax comes in the new house of the narrator. The narrator found a second cat very similar to Pluto and takes the cat home. But the feeling of love that the narrator had towards this second cat turned into hatred, leading him to kill this cat, but being interrupted by his wife. As a result of this interruption, the narrator ends up killing his wife. The narrator also mentioned that it is impossible to take the corpse out of the house because the neighbors are going to see him. Thus, he decided to hide the body in the house, specifically in the basement, and he walled up the body of the wife. And then the narrator tries to find the cat to get rid of him as well. Days later, the narrator mentioned that he feels he's in calm and that he's also able to sleep well. But days later, and by the end of the tale, the police visits him to inspection the house and to do some research regarding the case of the wife. But when they are about to leave, they hear the cry of the cat, and the police started to destroy the wall, and they discovered the corpse of the wife and the cat still alive in the head of the woman. Now moving on to the next section, we have the setting. The tale starts in a cell in which the narrator mentions that he might die the day after because, as we can see at the end of the tale, the police discovered his crime. Then we have the first house in which the crime towards Pluto takes place. and this is the same house which is destroyed in the fire. We also have the tavern where the narrator was coming when he found the second cat, and then we have the second house, specifically the basement where the crime towards his wife took place. To continue, we're going to present some features of the narrator.
Okay, so the narrator. As Belen said, we are faced with a person who is writing a letter the day before he's hanged to death. So we are faced with a narrator who narrates in first person, and therefore he's omniscient because he knows every single detail in the story because it is told from his point of view. However, he's not all that reliable since there are parts of the story where he jumps from one point to another, not giving enough details or not knowing even himself what happened to get to that point. This idea of the unnamed narrator is worth of pointing out as well because in this time, in this era, people started to drink more. Therefore, this unnamed narrator enhances the idea that this person, this wife-killing guy can be anyone. Anyone in any house in the proper conditions might turn into a killer. And as I said before, this could be a reflection of Edgar Allan Poe himself, because he was a bit of a drinker, he was violent, and he had some issues, as I said before. So moving on to the next slide, we have.
The tone of this tale is paranoid and disturbed. The narrator is paranoid towards the second cat because this cat reminds him of the crime he committed towards Pluto. And also, the narrator is mad in an insane way due to the acts that he committed, specifically to kill his loved ones. And it can be perceived that these acts completely destroyed the narrator. To continue, we're going to present the themes of this tale.
Now we are going to talk about the themes. The first one is transformation. Disturbing physical and psychological transformation are characteristics of most horror and gothic tales. In this case in particular, these changes are mainly psychological. After the protagonist gets married, his personality moves towards the dark side as he cruelly abuses his pets and his wife. His initially happy home life is turned upside down, and everyone involved is adversely affected and changed for the worse. The second one is violence. In The Black Cat, the unnamed narrator offers us a variety of violent acts, such as eye gouging, hanging, and axing. Until the end of the story, when somebody is killed, the detailed accounts of violence are focused on Pluto mainly, the black cat that moves from being a beloved pet to a persecuted beast. By the end of the story, the narrator has completely destroyed his family and perhaps completely destroyed himself in the process also. In this horror classic, violence is an insidious beast that spreads and grows, destroying everything it touches. The third one is alcohol. The unnamed narrator of this tale claims that he began abusing his wife and pets when his drinking got out of control. Some readers think that this is a temperance narrative, a popular genre in Poe's days. Temperance in this context means sobriety. The temperance movement focused on educating the public on the perceived dangers of drinking, while at the same time they were passing legislature prohibiting the manufacture, the use, and also the sale of alcohol. In a temperance narrative, alcohol is the major issue and is to blame for all the bad things that happen in the story, as it happens here.
Shall I?
Yes, go
okay.
ahead.
Okay. The following theme is justice and judgment. Well, this theme is related, as Belen said previously. The protagonist was writing this on a cell. This means the protagonist is in jail. He paid for what he did. It was as a justice was served, I would say. Yes. And this means that, well, this could be interpreted that he paid for his acts. He killed the cat and his wife. But we can be a social event that happened in here, that in the United States at that time, there were no laws or legislations that that condemned murdering women and cats. So this is a blank space in the I would say in the society that era. Then last but not least, we have guilt. Guilt in this tale was presented as the cat, where every time the protagonist did something wrong, the cat became more and more real in the story, more real, terrifying, and big. So we could say that the cat was as it was at its biggest form when the protagonist was discovered that the corpse was in the between the walls. So this is, I would say, guilt is what makes us human, and without guilt we can turn into madness. So feel guilt, I would say. Okay, moving on to the next section.
Okay. Through the whole story, we have different symbols. And more than just the title, the black cat is also an important symbol in the story. Like the bad omen of legend, the narrator believes that Pluto and his successor had led him down the path toward insanity and immorality. For ages, black cats have been related to witches, seen as a bad luck sign. In fact, during the story, there is like a comparison between black cats and witches, which I think Miguel is going to talk about later. The second symbol that we have here are the gallows. There is a fragment in which the reader understands that the patch the second cat has slowly took the shape of the gallows. This patch symbolizes the guilt and the depravity of the narrator, along with his changing personality. It represents the murder of Pluto and becomes a constant reminder of what the narrator has done, which draws on his guilty conscience. This patch also shows the personality of the narrator throughout the years and its change. Similar to the narrator, the cat was very kind in the beginning of the story and then slowly began to change into a monstrous being filled with rage and anger. The third one is the silhouette of the cat. After the house got burned, there was only one wall that were not reached, let's say, by the flames. And in this wall, people found the figure of a gigantic cat, which is also a reminder for the narrator of what he has done to Pluto. The next one is house and home. We often listen this sentence which says home sweet home. Home is supposed to be a place of safety and security. However, in this story, it becomes a dark and tragic place of madness and murder. The narrator kills his favorite pet first, then tries to kill its replacement, and goes on to kill his own wife. Even the relationships that should have been the central focus of this healthy and happy home fall victim to his deteriorating mental state. And the last one is fire. The fire represents the destruction of the narrator's own life. This occurs after he has become accustomed to drinking and after he killed Pluto, as I have already mentioned. The fire shows the leaving behind of the narrator's old morals for his newfound personality. So the next slides is about figures.
The figures of speech. Well, in this part of the presentation, we're going to mention and describe some figures of speech. The first one is simile. Well, as we know, simile is the comparison between two objects using the words like or as. For example, black cats as witches in disguises. What we can say here is that they are comparing black cats with witches, that the cats were disguised as witches. And this can be interpreted that from the medieval age, cats were thought, black cats especially, black cats were thought as bad luck and witches. The next figure is metaphor. Metaphor is a comparison of two objects without using the words like or as. For example, I had walled the monster up within the tomb. This can be interpreted as two things. The monster could be either the corpse of the wife or the cat, and within the tomb, that's the space between the two walls where the corpse and the cat were. So moving to the next slide.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry, I forgot to turn on my microphone. Okay, so to finish the presentation, we'd like to address three figures more. In this case, we have alliteration, which is not big brainer. It is the repetition of the same sound at the end of the two words, and in this case, we have terrified, have tortured. And personification, which is to give human traits to an animate object. And in this case, he's telling that the deep void from within the tomb was answering to him as soon as he started to poke the walls of the house to show how strong the house was. And the last figure of speech we have is the imagery, which is to describe in detail flavors, smells, or how an object looks. In this case, we have a really detailed description of how decayed and bloody this corpse was, because it was standing before them like a zombie, like if she were a real witch which came back from within the tomb to torment the mind of the narrator alongside the cat. So there we have the references, which we use to gather a lot of information about Edgar Allan Poe, the literary movements and the gold rush Carlos talked about. And we'd like now to place on the table some discussion subjects. I'd like to leave now the microphone open for my classmates from my group to address any point they want.
I would like to start by pointing out something that you mentioned regarding Poe's life. And I believe that the narrator's life was a projection of Poe's life. I mean, they both had problems with alcohol. They were both violent. I mean, we don't know if Edgar Allan Poe was as violent as the narrator regarding crimes, but his life was chaotic. I mean, he married his cousin, which is not really common in our society. And the main feature is that he had issues with alcohol. And I mean, Laura, maybe you can add something else to this comment?
Yes. Regarding to alcoholism in this tale, we can see that alcoholism also caused hallucinations on the narrator, and he ended up killing two supporting figures in his life, which were the black cat Pluto, who he considered his best friend, and his wife, who was, as we have been mentioning, very submissive, and she stayed by his side through until he killed her. So I think that we can see that alcohol plays an important is an important factor in this tale, and led the author to commit suicide. Yes. I don't know if Romina wants to add something, or
Yes.
Do you have any question, any comment, Mr. Bruno or our classmates? Because this is a discussion. If you would like to add something.
Romina, did you want to say something?
Okay. Maybe our classmates could make the connection between during the presentation I mentioned the temperance movement, which was mainly focused on educating people about the different dangers of drinking alcohol has, and that's something that still happens nowadays. For instance, if we watch the news, for example, we often see many accidents related to alcohol. Maybe someone can add something about that topic.
As a kind of conclusion towards the topic of alcohol, although that the purpose of this tale is not this, nowadays it can be used like to raise awareness towards the ingestion of alcohol. I mean, as Romina perfectly illustrated in the news, we can see it like almost every day. I don't know if the rest of the class or maybe Professor, you want to add something?
I would say that this also can be related to the addictions that we have in our lives. So yes. It is quite difficult to keep this being out of the addictions. And another point I'd like to add, moving from this alcohol topic, is the fact that nowadays women is portrayed as is, I think, quite empowered and independent in some extent. That, for example, if they have a husband, they can work, they can raise their children or their own, and they can have a word, they can do what they want. However, in that time and in this story, we can see that, as Laura said before, that this was the wife was quite submissive, and she did nothing. She was quiet, she was kind, and the only attempt to do something on her own, she was killed. She tried to save the cat, and she was killed. And this can be an example of the violence that it was addressed as the theme, and a feminicide or femicide that occurred in this story. Any comments? Any questions that anybody would like to add to this conversation, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Yes, we can.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
I wanted to maybe ask the group or maybe in the class. I've been listening to you, and I had concluded that this tale has very good symbolisms and aspects of life, maybe that maybe we can use as educational tools. So I wanted to ask, do you think that this tale could be a educational tool to use in the classroom to address these topics and maybe promote reflection between teacher and students? Because as you were discussing lately, this topic of violence and the what's it called, the temperance
Temperance.
yeah, that one.
Mm.
I was thinking, how could we use it in the classroom? If it is a good tale to use or maybe not. What do you think?
I would say that maybe you can use it with adolescents, because the tale it's I mean it's not real. I would say recommended for children, because it is somehow violent, really
Yes.
violent. So yes, it would be useful for addressing these topics like violence, alcohol, the use of alcohol in adolescents maybe, but I would not use it with children, I would say. I don't know what my classmates think about it.
Yes.
Maybe we can also use it to raise awareness towards being responsible to our pets, because
Yeah.
the main topic here is, well, murder, but not only the wife was killed, but also the cat. They suffer a lot as a consequence of the temperament of the narrator. Laura, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I wanted to say that I agree with Romina said, and also with what you said, because as you mentioned, it's not only that he killed his wife, but he also abused his pets. And if you recall, he was a kind person to his pets. He's recognized for this feature, and then due to alcoholism, he became abusive towards his pets. So it's like to, as you mentioned also, raise awareness to be more, I don't know, to open our minds and realize that alcoholism is a real problem in our society nowadays as well.
Catalina, I believe, had
Yes.
a question.
Yes, I wanted to address this. So Catalina in the chat wrote, I have a question. You mentioned, oh, I'm sorry, the chat moved. I have a question. You mentioned that killing cats and women was not punished at that time, right? That was a sort of lacuna. Could you explain that again, please? So do we have any answer to this? Does anybody want to say something about this?
I think Miguel knows. He researched a little bit more on that?
Yeah, throw it to me. Okay, so at that time, okay, we have to acknowledge that this was in the early 1800s. Therefore, the role of the women was not the modern role we have today. However, in this era, even though the first, as many of you might know, one of the first countries to have the laws to protect animals, ironically, was the Nazi Third Reich. And that happened in the 1940s. We're talking almost a century. However, in this Romanticism era, there was a movement. There was the idea of having pets, housing animals, and giving them love. It was seen like as something good, as something that was worth of noticing and praising, because if you did that, you were a good citizen and you were a good person for doing that. However, in this story, we have the point of view that of Edgar Allan Poe, which was really particular, because he saw the idea of this sort of hypocrisy of people, because they portrayed their lives in a way that wasn't the real life they were living. From the door outside, they were a happy-go-lucky family, whereas in the inside there was a constant fight for control, because of alcohol, violence. This narrator, I like to call him John Doe. John Doe was a violent person who, instead of taking into his wife or the outside world, he took his frustrations onto their animals, because they had several pets. And the first and the last one in suffering this violence, this punishment, was Pluto. And when the woman tried to take an active role in this story, she was, I like to think that John Doe was blinded by violence and alcohol and his guilt for killing Pluto. But he didn't aim for the head of the woman. However, when she tried to avoid Pluto's death, she was killed, and the husband didn't bat an eye, because he thought of burning the corpse. He thought of chopping the corpse into smaller pieces and throw them out gradually. So he was a really messed up person. And this was for Edgar Allan Poe, who was a violent person as well and a drinker. It was a really violent and hypocritical era to live in.
Do you have any more questions or comments, maybe?
You can write it on the chat.
I have a comment. I was after your presentation, I was thinking that maybe this story was more like written in order to prevent people from getting into this witchery or satanic type of religious, because at that time I believe everyone was very religious, but in terms of Christianity, everyone were supposed to live under the rules of God, and they did really have it like a very important subject in their lives. Like, you have to do things right, and everything was very Christian. let's say. So I think that this story was a kind of warning for the people to do not mess with other religions, because I think the cat represents witchery and this pagan type of religions, and I think that what they tried to do was that portray how a man messing with this type of religion and witchery and Satanism can end up killing people and doing terrible things and end up in having a miserable life. I don't know if you can relate to that part, but I thought it was really interesting. It caught my attention. That part, I thought about it like that. I don't know about you.
Okay,
Rocio.
so
Oh, who should?
go ahead, Carlos.
Oh, okay. And Rocio, that was a pretty good observation. I really liked it too, and I can also relate it that in that age, the people were in contact with the natives and they had their own beliefs. So this could be also connected that as the white people coming there was getting together, they were getting acquainted with the native people. So maybe this was a kind of way of setting a barrier that maybe that saying, okay, the natives, what they believe, it's bad. It's going to cause murder. So believe in the Christian. Believe in the Christianity.
Yes. Like they
That's
were
the real
preventing
religion. Yes.
this kind of merge between Christianity and Native Americans' beliefs. So you have to. It was. I thought about it like a way of. ¿Cómo decirlo? Ahí lo voy a decir en español, perdón. Pero como ensuciar o hacerlo ver como malo la religión de ellos. ¿Ah?
Tarnish?
Yes, that could be. That's what I thought. Yeah, like Carlos. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Rocio. Your comment was excellent. Okay, does anybody else have any question? Another question?
I would like to add something that I read. It said that the black cat could be like an allegory of a slave, since abusing slaves was also allowed in that age, and that Edgar Allan Poe could be relating this murder to slaves being killed as well. That's my aporte.
Yes, that could be interpreted as that point.
Yes.
Also.
Yes, it could be as well.
Yes.
Does anybody else have any comment?
I think that would be our presentation.
I think I have to mention something that I forgot to pinpoint during when I was thinking about this romantic period. That the romantic period in the United States was a response from the last period, that was the Enlightenment period, along with the neoclassicism. That this period, people were quite objective in their writings, and the writers were doing where they did making people do this, do that. They are saying, okay, you have to do what they have and they don't have to do. So the people got tired of this. So that's why how they responded with this romanticism. So to have it for you clear. So do you have any other question?
I think that would be our presentation.
Thank you for your attention and the comments and questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you guys. Thank you very much for your presentation. Quite thorough and understandable. I enjoyed the comments, the questions made by the audience. I think that's what I really believe, that the teacher should try to disappear as much as possible and let the students conduct the process of learning. I think many of the questions actually made by your classmates were questions that I had written here in my notebook that were asked before. So I'm really glad the way that this turned out. I think it fully accomplish my expectations in terms of what a book report should be. So congratulations, kudos again to your performance. Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask questions today because for that reason, because I think many of the questions were already asked. So I'm going to type my questions in the chat. I don't expect you to answer these questions because we already I'm going to finish the session, okay? But I leave these questions for you to explore them if you want later, okay? You, the group, and also the class. I also uploaded PDF file to the team. So if you check in the team before starting the session, you can see on top that there are several tabs. One of them says Archivos. And in those archivos, I uploaded a PDF file that I found very interesting with several questions. Questions that if you read the story, you should be able to answer them. And people who have not read the story may have some questions about this handout. And so they may turn to you to answer them. For example, questions like, in which way is the first Pluto different or alike with the second one? I mean, there are some characteristics that were given, right, that are part of the details that sometimes if you have not read the book, in a book report, those details are not present, okay? So congratulations again. My questions are in the chat room, but we're done for today. Thank you for your excellent book report. I will see you next
Wednesday,
exactly, next
Yes.
Wednesday. And I think that Moby Dick is the next book report. So Moby Dick group should be ready. The Scarlet Letter should be ready. And the Cask of Amontillado should be ready. Okay, I mean, at least 3 tales. Yes, sorry.
Professor?
Go on. Mm-hmm.
You could write in the chat the next groups just to remind.
Yeah, no problem. I'll do that immediately because it's just
Thank you.
a copy and paste that I'll do right away.
Oh, Mr. Meanwhile, I have a question related that next Thursday is 21st. So that's a holiday, and 22 is a sandwich day. Is that they going? Have you been informed if what day we're going to have classes or not?
No, I haven't received any official communication. Therefore, I cannot be held responsible for sharing with you any information. I understand that 21st is the holiday, but I didn't have any idea on the second piece of information, Carlos, that the 22nd was also an off day. I'm happy for that, but I don't know. I really do not know.
No, I mean for not getting delayed because of what happened in last class, and then this kind of off day, and then we're going getting delayed, more delayed, which we don't want to, of course.
Right. We will have to make some decisions in that case, such as, for example, shorten the book reports. Kind of make 2 fit in 1 hour, or maybe reschedule a class, maybe. But it all depends on how much time you have to have an extra session. So we will discuss that. Okay, we will discuss that. Yeah, so I will meet you on the 20th. On the 20th, at least we should have 2 book reports, right?
Right.
Okay. Alrighty.
Yes.
Do you have any other questions?
I don't think so.
Okay. So have a wonderful day. Stay safe.
You
You too,
too.
Professor.
Have a nice
Thank
weekend.
you.
Nice
Bye.
weekend.
You too. You
Bye.
too.